From maintenance of county roads to the administration of criminal justice. From determining the taxable value of real property to controlling the spread of infectious diseases. From protecting children and the elderly to marriage licenses and motor vehicle transactions. From keeping the peace to protecting our environment and making sure that your vote counts. El Paso County government is working for you. Welcome to El Paso County Works. This program is produced by the El Paso County Public Information Office to inform citizens about the programs and services of Colorado's most populous county.
Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for watching. Our community here in El Paso County is doing very well at recovering from the Waldo Canyon fire from last summer. But right now it's very important for all of us to understand that there are long-term effects that are going to come from this fire that we're all going to need to deal with, we're all going to need to adapt to. This is because the fire has made fundamental changes to the landscape that have dramatically increased the risk of flash flooding. This is something that all of us here in the Pikes Peak region need to understand, because as a community, we need to adapt to this new reality in the way that our landscape works. Now, the first thing we need to understand is a little look back at history, in that this entire region has always had a risk of flooding. Here you see a picture from 1921 in one of the original versions of the Bijou Street Bridge. Later on in 1935, there was a catastrophic flood in this area. Created a great deal of damage, lost a few lives in this flood. We're told that at the confluence of Fountain Creek and Monument Creek, the water was a mile wide. On any given day here in the area, you can walk across this creek, probably without getting your shoes wet. As recently as 1999, the entire county was very heavily hit by floods all over the area. So as you can see, this is not a new risk for our community. But what has changed now is that the fire and the effects of the fire have now increased this risk. So we're still at risk of flooding, but that risk has now been greatly magnified. So why has it been magnified? Because what the fire did was damage the soil. To understand this, think of the soil of a forest like the skin of your body. It's a living system. Well, when you burn the skin on your hand, when you burn the skin on your body, it doesn't work the way it should. The same thing happens with the soil in a forest. When you burn the soil, it doesn't absorb water. It doesn't work the way it should. Now, like your skin, forest soil will eventually heal. But unlike your skin, the healing time for forest soil is measured in years and decades, not in days and weeks. So 60% of the Waldo burn area looks very similar to this. The soil in 60% of the burn area, that's more than 10,000 acres of soil, was so severely burned that it will not absorb water anymore. This means that when rainfall hits this soil, it will simply run off. On a normal day, in normal soil, the rain will hit the soil, some of it will soak in, and the excess will run off. This excess runoff has created great floods for our region in heavy rains in the past, but now all of the water will run off of the burned areas. So you're probably asking at this point, well, hasn't work been done? We saw all these pictures of mulching and the Forest Service dropping hay and wood shred up on the burned areas. What about that? Isn't that doing any good? Well, yes, it is doing some good. And a lot of work has been done. You need to understand that too. People have been very, very busy. A lot of mulch and a lot of hay has been dropped on these burned areas. A lot of folks have very busily laid logs across certain areas of the hillsides to help slow the water down. All of these treatments help. We're going to be doing more of them. We're going to be doing as many as we possibly can, and we're working very hard to make sure that we put these treatments in the right places to do the most good at protecting our communities. But the burn scar up in the mountains for the Waldo Canyon fire is extremely large. We're talking about 18,000 football fields worth of land was damaged by the fire. And some of this land was too steep for any of these treatments, even from the air. So every one of these treatments is important, and every one of these treatments is valuable, and we're going to be doing as many as we possibly can, but every one of these treatments is a very small bandage on what is a very large wound. Every one of these bandages helps, but even if we were able to do every single treatment that it's possible to do, and do it all at once, right now, today, it would not fix this problem. It would only reduce the flooding somewhat. We can't fix this problem. As a community, we have to learn how to get out of the way. One of the things to help visualize this is to look at what we call a watershed. This is an important word to learn. Up in the mountains, anywhere in this area really, wherever you have a valley-shaped area, it'll drain into a little creek at the bottom. Sometimes you won't even see a creek. It's just a little low spot that fills up with rain whenever it rains. The whole area that drains down into the same little creek is called a watershed, and we name the watersheds for the creeks. The important thing to understand about watersheds is that they act like a funnel, very much like this. Watersheds are very wide. So you've got a lot of surface area that can catch the rain. And at the bottom, you've got a little bitty creek, a very small drainage. So all the water that comes in the top of the funnel, all the water that rains down into the top of a watershed has to eventually drain out of the bottom through a little creek. This is important. So the more water that hits this area, it all eventually has to come down. So in areas that are downstream of these burned watersheds, if most of this watershed is burned, more water is going to come down. And the creek that once was able to carry the water away is probably not able to carry the water away anymore. So a little rainfall in a burned watershed can translate to a great deal of water in what used to be a small creek at the bottom. Now, one of the questions I often get is, well, how much rain is going to cause a flood? How much rain do we have to worry about? And that's a great question. And I've posed it to the scientists that are working with us on this problem. And what they've explained to me is that it's not the total amount of rain that's really the issue. It's how fast the rain falls. It's the rate. It's not the amount of rain. So the way to understand this again is to think of our funnel again. If I have a funnel and I have a pitcher of water and I slowly trickle the water into my funnel, this small opening at the bottom will carry the water away just fine. Same thing for a watershed. If I have a slow, gentle drizzle of a rain in a burned watershed, the little tiny creek at the bottom of the watershed will carry the water away. We have no problem. But what if I take my entire pitcher of water and I dump it into this funnel all at once? Now this little hole can't drain the water away fast enough. I've got more water coming in faster than it can leave the system. Same thing happens to a watershed. If we have a heavy rain that dumps a lot of water quickly, all at once, the little small creek at the bottom cannot carry it away the same way it used to. At that point now, the creek swells, we have flood conditions, and we have a big problem in the area. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. And not only will creeks swell, but they will swell very, very quickly. This is something to understand. Here's an example. July 8th on Monument Creek, right here in the middle of the city. Some rain was falling here in the city, but most of the rain was falling up on the burn scar. And we had some spotters out checking flood conditions, and they took a picture of the creek. This is the way the creek looks like on most days. You could walk across this with hardly getting wet. It's about ankle deep mostly. But meanwhile, the rain is falling on the burn scar. It's draining down the hillsides, it's coming down through the little gullies and spilling into this creek. And within less than a minute, suddenly we have this much water. Our observers told us that the water went from ankle high to chest deep in seconds. This is why we call it flash flooding because it happens in a flash. This is very important for you to understand about flash flood warnings. When a flash flood warning goes up, it means this is imminent. You need to take action, you need to get to safety, and you need to do it right now. This is very, very serious. The other thing to understand about flash flooding is that the rain was not falling very much where this observer was standing and taking this picture. The rain was falling miles away, up in the burn scar. But when it finally swelled the creeks and everything came down into this one area, the effect was sudden and it was very large. So this is something to very much to keep aware of. When you teach your children to not play in creeks, when you decide yourself how to stay away from the water. Flash flooding is instant. Here's an example, though, of what happens when a lot of water comes down from the rain. This was a 2-inch rainfall in 2006 that hit the Hayman burn scar up in Teller County. Teller County has endured now 10 years of flooding problems after the Hayman. But as you can see on the left side of the picture, there's a creek that runs along this road. This is Highway 67, north of Woodland Park. 2 inches of rain hit this area very quickly. The stream swelled, and many miles of roadway were damaged here like this, just from the swelling creek. Now think back to our funnel once more. Here you see where a culvert has gone under the road. We're now starting to call these choke points. Imagine what happens if suddenly you take your pitcher of water, dump it all into your funnel, and the hole at the bottom cannot drain the water fast enough. The rest of the water is going to spill over the top of the funnel. That's exactly what happens at these choke points. Here's a spot where the swollen creek was going through a culvert, filled the culvert. The water has to go somewhere, so it goes right over the top of the road. So when this happens to a road, a culvert, a bridge, it's very, very destructive. The bridges and the culverts are not designed to take this kind of abuse. So this is something that's very important to understand. We have many, many choke points here in the area. There's a lot of work being done to make them better, but there's a lot of work that's going to have to get done before they can handle this extra rainfall. Now here's one more thing to think about when we think about flooding. So far we've understood that the burned soil will create more water running off from the hillsides. So we'll have more water coming down, more water in the creeks, and that in itself is a hazard. The second thing you need to understand is that the mountains and the soil on our mountains is crumbly and it's sandy and it washes away very easily. It's very erodible. So if you look at this picture, again from 1999's floods, you'll notice that the water coming down from Fountain Creek is chocolate brown. It's quite brown. This is because it's dissolved and washed away a great deal of mud and sand from the upper areas of Ute Pass. You can see the color difference right there. This has always been a feature of flooding in this area. Sediment problems like this have always happened. But now the fire has made this problem worse as well. This is a picture of Sand Creek right after the storm on July 30th that gave us an awful lot of problems. Notice the heavy, heavy layer of sediment in the bottom of the creek bed and a lot of places where new sediment has washed away from the creek sides. The problem with this, of course, is that once all this sediment, all this debris washes away, it's going to have to wind up somewhere. It's usually not going to wind up where we want it. It's going to be a problem no matter where it hits. At the very minimum, we'll have a problem like this where we have a great deal of debris piled up on something like a road. This mudslide here closed Highway 24 all night on the night of the 30th of July. If you look back during the Waldo Canyon fire and remember that we closed Highway 24 for a week and all the huge economic disruption it caused to our community during that time, you realize that closing down a highway like this is a very big problem for our community, something we're going to have to learn to adapt to. The other thing to notice about this mudslide problem is that these debris flows, these mudslides happen very, very quickly. This is why this truck was caught here. He was driving up Highway 24 at highway speeds and was caught by this mudslide as it came down. Fortunately, both occupants in this truck escaped without injury, but it was a very near thing, and it's a very big concern to us. So debris flows, like flash floods, happen in a flash. But the thing that sets debris flows apart from flash floods and makes them even more dangerous is that they're more powerful. If you can just imagine if you had a quart of water, it's fairly heavy, right? I think it's 8 pounds roughly is in a gallon of water. But when you mix mud in with this, when you mix soil to make liquid mud, it makes that mixture more dense. It's heavier. And when something is heavier, it packs more force. It's got more strength to it. When it hits something moving at speed, it's going to do more damage. It's going to do damage to buildings. It's going to do damage to bridges, to roads, to culverts, and it's deadly. So debris flows are a very big concern, and whenever you think flash flooding right now, you need to also be thinking about the mud that's going to come with it, because when the fire burned the hillsides, it took away the vegetation. It killed and destroyed the vegetation that was holding the soil into place. So the mountains were always erodible. The soil always had a tendency to wash down from these hillsides, but now there's no roots holding the soil anymore, and it comes off even easier. So like the flooding problem is now worse, our debris problem is now worse. We not only have more water coming down, we also have more of this coming down, and it's very dangerous. Now this video here is an example of what I mean when I say that debris flows are very, very powerful. This shows a debris flow that happened in 2003 in Clear Creek County. And you see here that this flow is moving huge boulders as if they were just pebbles. Now, all the experts agree that an event like this is possible if a long, heavy rain hits some areas of the Waldo Burn area. So at this point, you're probably thinking, what in the world is anybody doing about this? And again, we're doing a lot about this. So far, we've talked right now about a lot of very serious matters. It's important for you to understand what we're all dealing with. But I would like to now shift our focus to what are we doing as a community to adapt to this new reality, and what you can do as individuals and as families to adapt to this new reality. First of all, your local governments are taking action. We're doing a lot of emergency protection of critical facilities such as fire stations and schools. This is an example. This is an emergency flood wall that was put up to protect the Ute Pass Elementary School in Chipeta Park. Our kids are our most precious resource, and we spared no expense in making sure that they were protected. A lot of work like this is being done. We're working together as local governments all over this region to address flooding problems and work on projects, and we started doing this work while the fire was still raging. So while the fire was still active, we began having these meetings. We've been working together in close coordination ever since. We've also been working with our local first responders to make response plans, to prepare them to save lives when a flood occurs. We've been making plans to shelter people who are displaced and to take care of the vulnerable. So your local government has been on the job doing a lot to try to do what we can to make this better and to get us prepared as a community to respond to this. But the most important thing, the most important feature of all of our community preparedness is going to be you. Local government can do its part, but to be truly safe, each individual has got to be part of the solution. So you need to remember that emergency preparedness starts with you. You need to understand your own risk. You need to make your own plan to be safe when a flood happens. And then you need to improve your outcome by putting that plan into action, heeding warnings, and doing the things you need to do to be safe when a flood actually occurs. What we'll do now is look at some examples of how you can do this, point you to some resources that will help you get these three things done. First of all emergency preparedness begins with knowing your own risk, especially in a flood. As you can imagine, if you live or work right along a creek that leads down from the Waldo Canyon burn scar, let's say up in Ute Pass, your risk of flash flood is dramatically higher than someone who lives in Calhoun. Simple geography. So we can't go out and say everyone needs to plan for a flood the same way. No, you need to start by understanding your own personal risk. Here's a great tool to help you do that. The City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County government have worked together to build an excellent online map that will show you exactly where you are in relation to some known risks. On this map, there's blue shaded areas along the creeks. This blue shaded area represents what we call the 100-year floodplain. Right now, that is our best estimate for who would be at risk from a serious flash flood along one of these drainages. So far, that is our best information. It's not the best information yet, but more information is coming. There's a scientific study underway right now that will give us a much better idea of where to draw this line to help you determine your risk level along these creeks. So that's important to know. The second thing to watch in this map, there's these little points, there's dark circles with little gold cross marks in them. Those are what the locations of our known choke points. Things like culverts, low-lying bridges, narrow spots in channels. So as you look at the map, if you can see that your address is in the shaded area or very close to it, then you're probably at risk more than usual for flooding. If you are also close to one of these choke point areas, you may also be at higher risk. But it's important to understand that this map is an estimate. It's the best estimate we have based on the information we have. When better information is available, this map will show it. So bottom line is when we know more, you'll know more. But for now, this is the best we've got. But each individual family is going to have to determine its own risk based on its own circumstances. For example, if you have vulnerable folks in your family, the very old, the very young, you're probably at higher risk and your plan needs to reflect that. But this is a great place to start. Once you know your risk, once you've determined your own level of risk, then you need to make a plan to address it. If you have determined that you are at a high risk of flooding, let's say if you're really, really close to or in that blue shaded area, and you are pretty well sure that a flood is going to affect you, that you may have water in your house, then you need to make a plan to move up. This could be as simple as moving to the second floor during a flood warning. This could be as simple as sleeping on the second floor during the night when you're concerned that flood could be an issue. If a flash flood warning goes up, you should plan to get out of your house and up to a place of safety as soon as possible. Here you see a kit. An emergency kit should be packed and ready to go if you're at high risk of flood. The idea is when a flash flood warning goes up, you do not want to be going around the house packing. You need a kit, you need it ready to go so that you can leave without delay. Sometimes people have asked me, well, can I drive? The answer is, well, it depends. If you can drive straight from your house and go nothing but uphill, that could probably be a good plan. But do not drive if you have to drive out of your neighborhood through low-lying areas, along creeks or cross creeks. We don't want to think evacuation here. We want to think relocation. Get up, move up. Because our roads often cross creeks, go close to low-lying floodable areas, and we don't want you to be in a vehicle if a flood comes through that area. Very dangerous place to be. So if you're at high risk, the plan is to move up as quickly as you can without delay. Now let's say you're not right close to a creek. You're not in that shaded area or very close to that area. You're not next to one of those choke points that's a concern. You're out a little ways away. Well, then a flood could definitely disrupt your life by interfering with your transportation. You might be concerned that you might lose power or water service for a short time or a few days, but your house and your place of business, you're pretty confident are going to be safe. In this case, we'd like you to make you a plan to shelter in place. Shelter in place just means you're going to stay where you are, but you're not going to plan to travel because, again, we don't want to be on the roads in a flooding situation where your car could be vulnerable. So what you need to do in that case is make sure you have enough supplies, food, water, to be able to sustain your family comfortably for about 3 days. And this is actually a very good idea to have even when you're not worried about flooding. I think every home in El Paso County should have one of these, and I wish we would. But shelter in place means you're going to be safe where you are, but let's assume that you can't get out of your neighborhood. So you're going to stay put. Now, if you're sheltering in place and a flood occurs, it's very important to wait for the water to recede before you try to leave your area. Never, ever, ever drive through floodwaters. It's terribly, terribly dangerous. 6 inches of moving water can knock you down if you walk through it. Only about 18 inches can sweep your car away. Half of the people who die in flash floods do so because their vehicle was swept away in moving water. So never, ever, ever cross floodwater. Very important, thank you. So last, to really improve your outcome in a flash flood, you need to be able to put your plan into place. And that means you need to know when it's time to put your plan into place. You need to know when a flood is imminent. You need to know when it's time to take action. Fortunately, there is a lot of good ways to get information to do this. Both El Paso, well, not both. El Paso County, the City of Colorado Springs, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office, many, many organizations are working together to put information out very quickly in the case of an emergency. You see here a couple of great online tools, the county's Twitter feed, the Sheriff's Office Facebook page, multiple ways you can get your information on your phone. We'd also like you to register your cell phones with El Paso Teller 911. You see that address here on the screen as well. This is very important because when emergency notifications go out to your neighborhood, they will not reach your cell phone unless you've registered it. Also, if you have a voice over IP telephone, a digital phone, when in doubt, assume it is, we'd like you to register that as well to make sure you get that information. But this is a good time to say that no matter what your favorite source of information is, no matter what your preferred source of news is, have more than one. No one source of information, no one source of warning is ever perfect. So you want to think layers of information, just like you have layers of planning and layers of protection, so that you get your information from multiple sources. But when you go to the El Paso County website, we have a great page that will point you to lots and lots of ways to get information on your mobile devices, at your home, at your place of business. So have lots of ways to find out what's going on. So no matter which one of these official information sources you use to advise you of when to put your plan in action, understand that all of them are going to be taking our guidance from the National Weather Service. And so there's some terms that you should understand and understand what they mean, because you'll be hearing these come out from the media and from your local government social media sources and any other form of information that's going to tell you about flood. First is something we call a flash flood watch. This means that there is a potential for life-threatening flooding in the area that they'll describe, typically downstream of the Waldo burn scar. That means not just could a flood happen, there is a potential that a flash flood could happen. And as you've already seen, a flash flood is very, very dangerous and something that you need to take very seriously. Second, there's a term called an advisory. A flood advisory is pretty much a heads up that some kind of flooding could occur in your area. Typically, this is what we might call nuisance flooding or minor flooding. It could be isolated street flooding or flooding of parking lots or culverts. You'll definitely see the creeks a little higher than usual. This is typically not what you would consider a flash flood. So if you hear the word advisory, You may not necessarily need to climb to safety at that point, but you should be paying attention, just as you would in a flash flood watch. So in both a flash flood watch and a flood advisory, this tells you that it's time to start really paying attention to your sources of news, listening to your radio, checking your social media channels, or wherever you like to get your news from, to find out what conditions are like. Because as conditions change, so should your actions. Finally, there's the most serious of these, and this is the flash flood warning. This means that life-threatening flooding, flash flooding, is expected soon, or it's already happening. We've maybe had an observer already seen the flooding happening, and they report this, and the National Weather Service will then issue a flash flood warning based on that. When you hear a flash flood warning, it means you need to take action now. A flash flood warning is very similar to a tornado warning. I've had folks come to me and say, a tornado warning goes up and we hide in the basement and nothing happens. Well, nothing happened right then. Other people have listened to listened to tornado warnings, gotten in the basement. The tornado takes the house out, but the family is still alive because they were in the basement. You need to have the same attitude in mind with flash flood warnings. Many times you will take action in a flash flood warning to keep yourself safe and keep your family safe, and in some of these cases, a flood will not occur. You still need to get in the mindset of taking action, because someday the flood will occur. And by taking action, you've improved your outcome. All right, so in the last few minutes here, we've talked about a lot of very serious things. And I know that this can be very sobering, but it's important to have this discussion so that we all know what we're facing here, and we all know what the new reality is for post-fire flooding in our area, so that we can all take the right actions to keep ourselves and our families safe. But as a closing thought, I'd like to leave you with something a little more positive. As you can see here in this photograph, the Waldo Canyon burn is already starting to recover. It will be a beautiful place again. The Pikes Peak region is a beautiful place to live, to work, to raise a family. We all love living here. We love living here for a reason. But the fire and the flooding that will follow this fire are just part of the natural processes that shaped this place. And ever since people started living in this region, we have adapted ourselves to these processes. By living here, we know how to cope with blizzards. We know how to deal with wildfire. And now, together, we are learning how to deal with flooding. We're learning how to keep ourselves safe. We're learning how to keep our families safe. And we are doing this together as a community. So please understand that your role in this is the most important role of all. That when each one of us knows our own risk, makes our own plan, will then improve our own outcome, not only for ourselves and our families, but also for our community at large. Thank you very much for your attention, and we'll talk again.
El Paso County Works is aired on the Pikes Peak Library District channel at 10 p.m. on the second and fourth Friday of each month. If you have suggestions for future program topics, please contact Jennifer Brown at jenniferbrown@elpasoco.com or call 238-4478.